Assalamu alaikum everyone, my name is Abdul Rehman, and today the topic of the podcast is reinterpretation of fiqh and the roles and rights of citizen in modern nation states. That's a very complex and important topic that should be discussed in modern times, how fiqh and sharia should be used in modern times when sharia or Islamic ruling meets the fiqh of reality. So for that, we have today Dr. Shadee. Dr. Shadee is currently serving as a scholar in residence at Islamic Center in New Jersey. He graduated from George Washington University and did his PhD from University of London. So he's also the founder of Safina Society, where he has launched different courses to serve for the cause of traditional Islamic education in the West. Thank you, Dr. Shadee, for joining us today.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
And rest, we have Furqan Saadat. He is financial analyst at Charter Communication. We have Rahat. He is engineering manager at Glass and Wire Communication. And we have Souman. He is a current student of theology at Harvard Divinity School. Thank you everyone for joining me today. So, Dr. Shadee, first question is, would you just briefly explain to our listeners, because I want to make it very simple in the start, because like the layman listening to this should understand, what's the difference between Sharia and fiqh?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. The simple answer to that is, I would say that a Sharia is more broad than the word fiqh. Sharia is the path that Allah Ta'ala has established for us in all matters. Okay. Anything good, that the Prophet ﷺ, as he said, if there's anything that is good, I've shown it to you. Anything that is bad for you, I've shown it to you. All of that, we can call that, this is the shara of Allah Ta'ala, the path. It can include beliefs. It could include, spirituality. It could, all that we would call that a sharia in general. Now, when we talk specifically about the Islamic sciences, people tend to refer to the sharia as the outward sciences that can be physically viewed and rationally understood. And they distinguish between sharia and tariqah and haqiqah. So that's another way of looking at the word sharia, another distinction, that you have the outward matters, outward and rational. All right, so that would be like doctrines and laws. And then spirituality is haqiqah, which is that which is inward. So that's another view. But ultimately, regardless how you view those, it is that which is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, fiqh is that which is the understanding of the human beings of the texts that Allah ta'ala has brought us and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We call fiqh. Now, what's the relationship between the two? A very important distinction and relationship, because when it seems that we're downgrading fiqh to be man's understanding of sharia, well, we all know that human beings make mistakes, okay? Which means there could be mistakes in fiqh. But it's very important to notice that the sharia itself has sort of announced, and Allah has in Surah An-Nisa and the Prophet ﷺ and other ahadith, that the path of the mu'mineen, whenever scholars come to a majority agreement upon a matter, then that matter will not be a misguidance. Okay, it will not be a misguidance. So that is when you say something will not be a misguidance, okay, then what can it be? It could be guidance or an error that doesn't have significance. Right, a non-harmful error. And that ayah in Surah An-Nisa is very important. وَمَن يُشَاقِقِ الرَّسُولِ مِن بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ الْهُدَى وَاتَّبَعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى وَنُصْلِهِ جَهَنَّمَ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. The most important glue. This verse is the glue between when we say fiqh and sharia, and we it seems that we're downgrading fiqh by saying it's the human understanding, but that human understanding is also guided and protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the sake of his servants. Because if all the scholars got something wrong, then the message wasn't clear, right? Then there's no hujjah. Hujjah means like a proof against us. If everyone got it wrong, why would I get it wrong too? Who's innocent and who's guilty at that point? So there would be no hujjah, there would be no way to know the truth, and it would actually be an accusation against the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ if the matter was not clear enough that there can't be a consensus understanding. So let me unpack that ayah, because I just said in Arabic. It says, whoever goes against, goes against the Prophet, breaks away is really for the Prophet, after guidance has been shown to him, and he follows other than the path of the believers, we abandon him as he has abandoned us, right? Or we abandon him to what he has chosen, okay? And we punished him in the fire, and what a evil end. So a couple important points here is that who are the believers that have a path? The path of the believers, Sabil al-Mu'mineen. Which believers establish religious paths? It's the scholars. So the Kalam scholars established a doctrinal path, a path of doctrine. The Hadith scholars established a religious path, how to understand Hadith. The four madhabs established paths of how to understand the law. The imams of the spiritual paths, they've established understandings of the spiritual path. So al-mu'mineen here are establishing a path, is only the scholars who do so. Common Muslim doesn't establish a religious path for anybody else, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that abandoning that, jama'ah, the word jama'ah in this sense means the long arching history of Islamic scholars that where there's a consensus on matters. Okay. Who abandons that can be punished in the hellfire. So therefore, following that consensus has a degree of obligation upon us. So that's Sharia, and that's fiqh, and that's the glue that binds the two.
So here comes a question like how necessary it is to preserve the traditional and historical value of Islamic rulings in Sharia, and when it collapses or when it meets the fiqh of reality, when it meets the new circumstances of modern times. So like how necessary is it to take the traditional and historical views and consider the modern solutions for the problems, for the circumstances in the modern times?
Okay, so
Dr. Shadee, let me add, to Abdurrahman's question. As you said, there is a consensus, right? Which we have been following for the past 1400 years.
yeah.
So let's say we have a consensus, and that consensus or ijma doesn't apply to our times or to that specific place or era.
Okay, so yeah.
Go ahead.
So this is a very important question. And let me tell you where there is a type of flaw or a blind spot when you're driving and you look from your left mirror to go left. Okay. I know Pakistan may have the driver's seat on the right side. I don't know. But there's going to be a blind spot. And you look and you make you shift lanes, but then you get hit, right? You get hit because there's a blind spot. So in every thought process, there sometimes are blind spots. Now, the blind spot is the separation between historical fiqh and present day situations. It's almost as if the scholars have left us these books, right? And here we are today. And it's as if the scholars have not produced a constant flow of new scholars within the four madhabs who are applying, who are the bridge between us right now and the past. And that's why it's very important to emphasize the living chain, the widespread living chain of transmission. And remember, one opinion, two opinions, one living person doesn't make a difference to us. We only going to practice that which has a very small degree of percent error. And that's why the concept of the large numbers is very important. And that's why we only have the four madhabs left. Let's say somebody came out of a cave tomorrow, right? And he said, by the way, we've been living in a cave and we have preserved Imam al-Awza'i's madhab from one person all the way to another, to another, to another, back to Imam al-Awza'i himself. We would say, thank you very much, that's wonderful. But no one's following that because you're one person. You're speculative. Could make a mistake. But the four madhabs have existed, and they have transmitted in every decade and every century dozens, hundreds, thousands of scholars who are connecting that chain. So we're not left alone to look at the world and to look at historical fiqh. We have scholars living amongst us. It's just people have to search them out, right? And there are many, and the Prophet promised that they would be apparent, public. You can find them, okay, until the Day of Judgment. So the answer to that is that within the madhabs, there are methods, and there is an achievement within scholarship, a type of level of scholarship that we would call al-mujtahid fi nawazil, which means the mujtahid in current affairs, contemporary issues. Now, what does that mean? And how does that word mujtahid is someone who can derive rulings. So what does it mean when we say mujtahid within of nawazil, of current affairs? How does that different from a regular mujtahid? Does that mean he's a mujtahid like Malik, Shafi'i, and Ahmad? No, he's not. Mujtahid, the original mujtahid, Imam, he can derive rulings himself from the Quran and the Hadith, himself. But the mujtahid that we have today within the four schools, and I'm sure all the four schools have this, they might use different terms for it, means that this person can use the rulings of the madhab, of the school of thought, as a primary source and make analogy against that for modern issues. So that's what fatwa, that's what a mufti is, okay? And so that person is very important, okay? It's extremely important. So that is a type of scholar. He's mastered his madhab so much, so well, that he can use the opinions within the school of thought as a primary source and make analogies for today against those opinions. Okay, so he's nowhere near to be like a mujtahid, like Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, and Ahmad, but he has what it takes to give us something that we can live with today.
Dr. Shadee here, if I recall my memory, Imam Abu Hanifa's famous saying about fiqh is, as overwhelming majority in subcontinent people follow, Hanafi school of thought. And his famous saying is, the fiqh is not rigid. Its application changes with time and space. And that's where, especially in the subcontinent, where most of our contexts actually come from, where we lack a lot. And I'll just give an example, when especially Pakistani state, were about to be becoming a nation state, a famous scholar, Muhammad Iqbal, Allama Muhammad, we call it, he said, we are going to become a nation state, hence and that'll be around 90% of our people will be Muslims. So we need to drive those fiqh rulings according to our times. And that never, unfortunately, happened in Pakistan, and we suffer from them. And one of the consequences of that is blasphemy laws, apostasy laws, which we keep on, making mistake time and time again. I think that's what you were pointing towards, right?
It's very important, a couple things. Number one, to emphasize what you said, which is our fiqh is consistent but flexible.
Yep.
The core is consistent, because if things change every decade and every century, then it's not consistent. But if things don't change, then it's not applicable. We can't apply it, right? So what does the Sharia bring? It brings firm foundations and principles and flexible application.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing, which is basically, I think that's what you said earlier, the first thing you said. And that is something that the scholars have said. We have firm and consistent core principles, okay, which sometimes in logic you call first principles. But then you have flexibility in the application. Now, that's in the legal matter that you can study. But there's another element of things, and that is what we call al-hikmah, right? Wisdom. Wisdom is not necessarily something you can always put pen to paper with. There's assessments, there's judgment calls. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Quran refers to the Prophet's sunnah as an example of hikmah. Sayyidina Ibrahim made dua, "Oh Allah, send my Arabia, send them a messenger, yatlu alayhim ayatik, that he will recite your verses to them. Wa yu'allimuhumul kitab, and he teaches them the book," which means that a superficial recitation of the Quran will not give you understanding, because the second part is now he has to teach you the book.
Yeah.
But you just recited it, right? Yeah, just because you recited it doesn't mean you understood it. وَيُعَلِّمُهُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, and he has to teach them hikmah. Now, the hikmah, according to Shafi'i, is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The sunnah of the messenger doesn't end with the messenger. Rather, it ends with the Khulafa al-Rashidin. Because he said, follow my sunnah and the Khulafa of the sunnah of the Khulafa al-Rashidin al-Mahdiin Ba'di, bite down with it with your molars. Now, when we look at the Sayyidina Ali bin Abi Talib, Sayyidina Uthman bin Affan, there's amazing wisdom that we learn. You might think to yourself, why did things go so bad in the time of Uthman and Ali? There's wisdom to show us how do you legislate, how do you apply the law in chaos.
The political process.
Yeah, in political chaos too.
Mm-hmm.
And what we notice that, don't we all know the rule in Surah Al-Hujurat of rebels?
Mm-hmm.
If someone rebels against the Khalifa, Surah Al-Hujurat, what's the law? Open any law, book of law, of Sharia, Fiqh. What does the law say? The law says rebels should be killed. They should be fought and executed, or they submit, one or the others. You cannot have rebellion in the ummah. Sayyidina Uthman, he had rebels, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't kill them. He didn't fight them. Why didn't he fight them? He didn't fight them because he felt that he knew and understood that laws related to rebellion are about benefit of society. And there will be no benefit with a civil war in Medina. Right?
It's not a binary.
It's not a binary. So he was thinking of what is the purpose of this law, and therefore, if I apply it at this moment, would the overall purpose be affected? Sayyidina Ali came, he did fight the rebels, and he stopped fighting the rebels, and then he fought the rebels again in different situations, right? So in the Battle of Safina, he fought them. Then they said, okay, we want to stop. So he stopped. Then the Kharijites fought him. Then they stopped, and so he stopped. So sometimes he fought them, sometimes he didn't. So what did he use? He used judgment on the overarching purpose of the law. But who is it who's doing that? Not me and you.
Yes.
It was Ali ibn Abi Talib, a great scholar, right? You know, who was obviously beyond the scholar. He's a companion who was a mujtahid, right? So
Shadee, from carrying on from the same discussion we were having, the very question, explanation you were giving, and one that, point which came to my mind was the non-state actor, the rebels or Kharjis you were talking about. The same issues or talking points, we can apply those issues to our times.
Exactly. So the point that we were making is that there is flexibility to the application of the law. But there's also wisdom, which is very subjective and should only be entrusted, the subjective opinions, to those who have a proven track record of knowledge and of taqwa and of trustworthiness and of fear of Allah, right? Because the subjective opinions is where, whims can, and limitations and desires can take place, and fears. So therefore, whims should only really be entrusted, or subjective opinions and the wisdoms, quote unquote, should really only be entrusted to those who have a proven track record, right? And that's why we often talk about the elders who have proven themselves time and time again.
But
and also, yeah,
how we can apply this concept, what you're talking about, to our times where we have the parliamentary system or a Congress, where the elders are parliamentarians, elected representative. They wouldn't have that, legal understanding of Sharia, but that'll be more of a political process, isn't it? And in that, when they are talking about political process, we are talking about their, every nation's own interest. And that's where, we can say a one group, a non-state actor group approach could be very different from other nation. And I think that's where the main fundamental reason, the fundamental point has to come into play where, okay, this, if a certain group crosses a red line, that's where we tell them, hey, you have crossed the line, and there'll be no lenient approach, political process engagement with you people.
Well, check it out. There's been a complete split, as the Prophet ﷺ prophesied, between the book and the governance. Prophet ﷺ said the Quran and the Sultan will split. So the Sultan is no longer operating based upon the Quran, meaning the religion in general. Now, why does that happen? Because the Prophet also said, "Minkum man yuwalla alaykum." Your ruler is a reflection of you.
Exactly.
The collective ummah has lost the will to apply this Sharia seriously in their lives. And therefore, we get rulers who reflect that, right? So if we as an ummah had the collective will, the desire to do something, we would do it. Desire and will. There's no such thing as what's practical and what's not. Do you want something or not? And nothing is more impractical than a man becoming a woman and a woman becoming a man. But they did it. There's nothing more impractical than transforming the meaning of marriage. Right? They did it. Why? Because decade after decade of will, they want it. When you want something badly enough, Allah opens a door, whether it's good or bad. Right? When you persist and insist, Allah opens for you. We as an ummah have very little collective will to take this deen and say, oh Allah, I'll change myself to fit the deen. I'm not going to say, oh, this is not practical. Oh, I don't like this. Oh, I need to get a fatwa for this. This is not practical. This doesn't suit the age. No. We don't have that will. If we as an ummah, if millions upon millions upon millions of people had the will to come up with that attitude and say, look, I'm going to wipe my own opinion slate clean. Give me the fiqh that's been agreed upon for centuries, right? So that's what I know the deen is, okay? And I'm going to do it. We can do it. We didn't have the willpower, right? Just don't have the willpower. So where do we go from here? It's developing that willpower. Develop the collective willpower amongst the people to have that attitude of, we want this Sharia. We want to see it. So let's start seeing it first in you, then in your family, then in your neighbors, and let's get a collective will, right? Once you have a collective will, you can do anything.
Mm-hmm. So,
Just wanted sorry.
Yeah, Souman, please continue.
I just wanted to add one more thing to what Furqan just said, that in the post 9/11 political world of the Western countries, especially US, UK, and others, European countries, it has been very difficult to merge both, to merge your traditional Islamic learnings with modern state narratives. For instance, even if you talk about Sharia at a public space in the US, you are going to be judged by others. That's like seriously. And on the other hand, that dimension of merging tradition and modernity is deeply exploited by post-colonial states like Pakistan, where they have literally like hijacked concepts like jihad. So it has become deeply problematic for us as a youth to understand how we can follow the great merger of tradition and modernity in Islam that our revered philosophers and classical Islamic scholars have done. So that makes it really difficult in the modern context. And also there is another question that is related to this: is the modern state is, as we know, it's inherently secular, so it becomes really difficult for us to partake politically in the processes happening in our countries. It doesn't matter whether we are in Pakistan or in the US. It is there are so many things when it comes of when you talk about politics, there are so many other factors that also need to be taken into consideration.
Look,
so we are just confused as a youth.
We can sit and list all the difficulties all day, right? Allah never guaranteed something is going to be easy, right? He guaranteed if you persist, okay, as a human being, you will get what you want. If you persist as a nation, you will get what you want. if you persist as a human being to convince your nation of something, either you will succeed or you will have a moderate success and pass it on to the next generation, or you will fail completely and Allah will count you as a martyr. So you're winning either way as an individual. But there is no guarantee of ease. There is a guarantee if you as an individual want to live Sharia. So I have, let's say, I know I don't have a book. Let's say this was the book of doctrine, law, and spirituality right here. I can live this in my life, 100% consistent with this. I can. If I insist, I can do it. I can't enforce it on anyone else. All right. I can't guarantee that my people will accept my message or this message, but I could die trying. Right. But the formula is very simple. It's national will. National meaning like the people's will. Yeah, there's going to be hardship. There's no guarantee from Allah it's not hard. And who made it hard? We made it hard on ourselves. And our forefathers, you know, it's haram actually to blame your elders. But mashallah, they're the reason.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's not the world that's difficult. It's the Muslims who dropped the ball and desired the dunya. As the Prophet said, you fear death and you love this dunya. So this is what they got us. So why are we going to turn around and say, oh, the world is difficult? We made it difficult. So there's no guarantee. But also, I would warn against this mental habit that I guarantee you that the Orientalists would love for us to keep having this mentality. And the enemies of Islam of, let's write a whole long list of why it's not possible. Then we give up, right? So all we can control is, number one, our own selves. But we have to stick to the formula. If there is an ummah-wide will, it will happen. No, it doesn't matter. It will change the world, right? By will. So will it happen in our lifetime? Who knows? But we know that that's the path, and that's what we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
So just extending the question of jihad, like it should be understood by the youth and someone wanting to learn Islam as their religion and Islamic rulings. So does the concept of jihad applies in modern times when, like previously, there were no treaties, there were no governors, so, right? So it was possible at that time, but right now when there are treaties, when there is governance, when there's proper nation states, so does that concept of jihad still applies in modern times? If not, then what's the wisdom of jihad in modern times?
There has to, the jihad as a legal term, as opposed to an Arabic term, you have to understand there's a difference. There's the Quranic jihad, which is struggle. It's Arabic language, general usage. There's a fiqhi, which is what you're talking about. The fiqhi jihad, which is it's war, right? And it has preconditions. But if the preconditions are met, then it applies. If the preconditions are not met, then it doesn't apply. Jihad, you can divide it into 3 categories based on the Quran and Hadith and the fuqaha. The first category being, the most obvious one, is the defense of your city. And that will still apply. Yeah, if India were to come and try to conquer Pakistan, I think you'd all get up and pick up your cricket rackets, right? And you'd have to do something to defend your country, and you'd die a shaheed. Okay. Even if somebody says, you know what, I don't even pray 5 times a day, I'm not doing this for the sake of Islam, I'm doing it because it's my country, right? You still die a shaheed, mashallah. Right? May Allah forgive that person. But just defending yourself and your country is the first level. And that will always exist. The second one is quelling rebellions within the country. Surah Al-Hujurat. Okay? And that, who can do that? Only the ruler can do that, the government. And then the third one is expanding the borders. And that is a natural process of civilizations when they have so much cohesion within their nation that they have to, for the health of the nation, expand, right? Like, can you tell Amazon right now, no more expansion? It's very
analogy,
it would be very unhealthy, right? When if you're underwater, right, and then all of a sudden you come out of water, you have to fill your lungs with air, right? So that jihad is expansion, okay? Which some nations, if you look at the history of nations,
Rise and fall, yeah.
they have such a cohesion at some point. They must expand, or else it will bring like a disease within the nation, and that nation will get sick and die. So they have to expand. I mean, every empire does this. Can you come to the USA after, World War II and said, okay, stop here, don't expand, when the whole world is right in front of you to expand, and you have such a cohesion within yourself? Oh, they expanded in a different way, not by colonizing, but in a modern form of expansion, right? So that's the idea of that. So that's the concept. And the question is, do the conditions apply? Are the conditions there? And look, what you had of expansion, when you cannot name me 5 Muslim countries where you can go from the north to the south of the country, except that you see litter all the way through the streets. What jihad are you talking about? When we have, honestly, rotten countries. To be honest, Turkey and Indonesia, maybe, or Malaysia, maybe you can live in these countries peacefully and happily, and the streets are clean, and the courts will give you justice. So when we talk about jihad, I only see that we're only talking about the defense of the city that is applicable today. Other than that, none of this ISIS and Qaeda or whatever, these, probably propped up organizations, not real organizations. These aren't natural organizations. These are propped up. We know what our people look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've seen these ISIS videos. If this was a organic movement, that video would be like 480p, right? It would be a trashy video. We know our people. So these are propped up movements meant to attract the fools within the ummah and give us a bad name. And they have attracted. They're mostly, Muslims in the ummah, but they've attracted the fools, the ignorant of the ummah, to give a bad name to the ummah. So that's my comment on jihad.
Dr. Shadee, but all these people, they're people from us, right? From our society.
ISIS.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that the leadership and the funding is coming somewhere else.
That's a different question. But
I mean, that's just a speculative theory of mine based upon common observation. That's all.
When we apply the same concept of jihad and all that stuff, as you mentioned, because it's a legal term and we can 100% apply, but we have to understand the context behind it.
Yeah.
Because these organizations, non-state actors, they are interpreting Quran and Hadith and Fiqh from 6th, 7th century.
They're rebels. They're literalists. They're rebels, and they should be killed.
And they don't understand. And that's, I think, the main point of our discussion was they're forgetting. Actually, it's not about them. It's about pretty much all Muslim majority countries, where they fail to understand that now we have become a nation state. The rules applies. Some of those concepts, they are genuine concepts, but the main the rulings and understanding and the context doesn't apply to it. Even in jihad, even in blasphemy, because now we are living in multicultural society where we have Hindus, where we have Christians, Muslims, Jews, and some of the ruling they may apply, but those contexts, those checkbox have to be met, and in most of the cases they are not met, and that's why these small problems, which actually poison the whole entire society, because they are looking at 7th, 8th century rulings.
Well, we all have 7th, 8th century rulings, but the question is are the conditions met for them?
Exactly.
And are they being applied flexibly and with wisdom? And are they understood properly? Right? So it's not about the ruling being from the past, because Salah is a 7th century ritual, right? Hajj is a 7th century ritual. But so it's not the question of whether it be from the past, because that was the best century, right? The greatest of generations is my generation, right? So it's more about, is it understood properly? Are the preconditions understood? Is the law by itself understood? Are the requirements met, and are they being applied with wisdom? Right? So that's really the question.
Go ahead,
So,
Rahat.
yeah, I would take the question from Rahat.
Yeah. So I have this question that you said that all these extremist groups, they are not from us. But I am from that part, like from the northern part of Pakistan. And
Well, yeah, I don't think the leadership of ISIS is organically grown.
Yeah, so in our part, it's the Taliban. It's not the ISIS, and it's like, the offshoot of Al-Qaeda and Taliban.
Sectarian organizations.
Yeah. So, and I have witnessed it like firsthand that it was from us, and the religious scholars were from the traditional Hanfi thought, school of thought. And all those who opposed them were the one that are rare muqallid, are the one that are the modern scholars. So you're saying that, okay, if someone is not following the traditional school of law, so he is not understanding Islam. So it's actually making a conflict for me that I have seen in my country that all those religious scholars who are following these strict school of thoughts, they actually supported all these extremist organizations and the mainstream religious scholars.
A branch of Hanafis in a certain time and a certain place does not represent Hanafism. They represent their understanding of Hanafism. You have to go to Turkey. You have to go to Syria. You have to go to India. So a madhab is not represented by one person or one group of people.
Who we are talking about?
Let's say he's saying the Taliban or something, right?
Yeah,
so I'm not familiar with the group, but he did mention a group, right? The Taliban. I'm not familiar with their actual specifics. Obviously, we know who the Taliban is, but I don't know their specifics. I don't know their leaders. But I can tell you, just rationally, one small group of human beings, which you could probably count as 100 scholars or 20 scholars, do they represent the entire tradition of Ahnaf? No, they're fallible. They're fallible. Their interpretation and their policy making is fallible. I don't have to agree with it. I mean, I'm sure you can get Syrian or Turkish or Indian or Chinese Hanafi scholars who would disagree and would do something different. So that's the application and interpretation of one context. So we can't say that they're not the be all and end all. So that's how we say that group you can disagree with, while the concept of the madhahib being the paths of Islam still stands.
So I have one more question on that. It's like, why we have restricted ijtihad to late 10th century and 11th century, and after that, like, we are not actually promoting that thing that, okay, Muslim scholars should come with ijtihad. So why it's been like restrained to that era? Is it like we have a lot of issues like mortgage and all those, the modern financial issues, and I'm not hearing a lot of opinion from our modern day scholars who believe in the traditional Islam?
Well, first of all, remember, we did say that the ijtihad is, first of all, it's still open, ijtihad, but meet the criterion, right? Meet the criterion. We're 5 of us in a room. One of you has a toothache, okay? Can anyone extract the tooth? No. Does that mean we don't believe in dentistry? No, we just don't have the conditions. We haven't met the qualifications. So the door of ijtihad is open, but do it. And how do we know that someone is a mujtahid? The scholars will agree. Yes, he has mastered everything required. He's going to come up the ranks. As Muhammad Ali was asked, is there anyone in the world who can beat you? He said, right now, no. He said, how do you know that? He said, because if there was, we would see him coming through the ranks, right? He's not going to come out of nowhere. He's going to have fought, and people know about him, and we talk about him, right? He's not going to come from Mars. So likewise, if there would be a absolute mujtahid who can go directly to the book and the sunnah, he would have to come from our world. We would know him. We would see him coming up, and the scholar would say, yes, you've mastered this. Yes, you've mastered this. Yes, you've mastered this, until finally they would confer upon him. That's how ijtihad works. That's how any profession works, right? But so in saying that, I'm saying that the door of ijtihad, of course, is open if the person meets the qualifications. But what is more practical that people have met the qualifications is what I said earlier, is mujtahid in the nazila, mujtahid within the school, taking analogies from within his school and the rulings within his school to give us solutions for matters. Right?
So yeah, just a follow-up question. So if a mujtahid or a scholar who studied Quran and Hadith on him or herself, and he didn't follow any proper school of thought, so what's your take on that? Like, I know a lot of people in then ghair muqallideen that they don't follow the imams or school of thoughts, and they
So
say
they're
that,
self-taught.
yeah, and then they say that okay, the first source of religion is Quran, and then Hadith, and then you come to the Fiqh. So if someone is going in that order rather than going from top to bottom to top, so how you
Okay, and he's a scholar?
Yeah, there are scholars, yeah.
Okay, who deemed him a scholar? Who deemed him a scholar? No, I'm just asking rationally. Let's take it rationally. Who deemed that person to be a scholar?
I consider them a scholar. Like, there are few people in our country.
So you conferred upon him scholarship?
Yes.
That means you must be a scholar. You bestowed upon him that he's a scholar. That means you know how to assess scholarship. That means you're a scholar.
For a Muslim, should I have to bestow scholarship on someone, or should I take the opinion of a person who is like he is giving me opinion based on Quran and Hadith, right? And then another scholar who believe in the traditional Islam, he is giving me opinion about an issue, and he is giving his evidences.
So we work. This is purely rational, right?
Yeah.
It's reference based, right?
Yep.
Can you furnish? You want a job? You furnish references that you can do the job. Can I furnish upon you a reference that you're an IT expert? When I'm a study of Islamic law, student of Islamic law, let's say hypothetically, you're an IT guy. You want to sign up to work with some company. Can I write you a reference that says you're a great IT guy?
Yeah.
I can't write you a reference, right?
Yeah.
My reference.
You don't know me, yeah.
My reference for you, you can rip it up. It's meaningless, right?
Yeah.
Only someone who knows IT can give a reference for another IT person.
Dr. Shadee,
right?
I have a point here to make.
So therefore, nobody can come and speak. Quran says and Hadith says, I would like, before I take from him, this is very safe, right? Can you please provide me, before you talk, and tell me what to do in my life with a reference? You're not the only human being in the world. There's other people studying. Can you give me a reference from others in the world who have said that you are capable and worthy and people should listen to you and I should go to Allah in the afterlife, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, on your word? Isn't that a fair request? Provide me with a reference, right? Some guy's going to work on the gas in your house. You know that if you mess up on gas, you die, right? The house could blow up. The gas could leak and you all die. When a guy comes, I'm going to say, are you a licensed whatever? Plumber, licensed gas, whatever. Yes or no? Who gave him the license? The local mosque? Or, some agency that works in the gas and plumbing? The agency, right? Who's in the agency? Other experts in the field. And who gave them the license? The previous generation of experts in gas. And who gave them the license? The previous experts. All the way back until the technology was founded. Well, why would I treat my akhirah any differently? I want references. I want a lot of references. I want that professional proof. We talk about social proof, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to buy a product to go to a restaurant, you read the reviews of the customers. One review, is it good for you? No. 2 reviews, good for you? No. I want to see 20, 30 reviews before I spend my money. Right? I want 10, 20, 12 reviews from other men of God who have devoted their lives, who themselves have reviews about them, before I take akhirah knowledge from somebody that I'm going to go meet God with on the day of judgment.
So
That's
here
the
comes
concept of isnad. We summarize that and call it isnad.
So here comes a question like, does that mean understanding the Islamic rulings, Sharia, is restricted to the trained scholars? Because I mean, talking realistically, it's very natural that everyone cannot be a scholar, right? Someone would be from a different field. So don't you think that restricts understanding rulings, Sharia, fiqh, and everything to a scholar? And how would a common man, if he has a knowledge of hadith, Quran, right? He has read it, understood it, and he has no scholar around him, right? So what's wisdom, what's hikmah then, if he can't use that and he can't do ijtihad and he has no one around him? So
what around him? Allah has made the internet for a reason. Allah's expanded the population of the Muslims so much. There is Muslims in Brazil, in Chile, okay, in Alaska, in Japan. How is that poor Muslim going to learn his deen? You think Allah has left him alone? Nobody can go and type. I guarantee you, every Muslim in the world, if his passions and desires wants to look at something haram, he can go and type very well and find it, right or wrong. So if his akhirah is concerned, you can connect yourself. I mean, how did you meet? How did we connect? I don't know you, you don't know me. We connected, right? So Allah Ta'ala has never left the Muslim without an avenue to learn. And why did Allah create, for example, nasikh and mansukh, abrogated and not abrogated, to make us dependent upon knowledge, upon experts? Why did Allah Ta'ala create? I mean, why is farming so difficult? To make us dependent upon farmers. Do I say, well, if farming is so difficult, then I have to rely upon a farmer? Okay, so rely upon him. You're a doctor. They rely upon you. Another person is an IT expert. We rely upon them. So there are guilds and professions, right? And the access to those people is there,
So,
right? So that idea is put effort. You want to learn how to drive a car. You want to go to school. You want to get your internet connected. Don't you call somebody? Don't you move your legs and your fingers on the computer and pick up the phone and do effort? Nobody says, I'm not going to the supermarket. I want to grow the food myself. I don't want to be independent. Why should I rely upon the supermarket? It's the same thing. Right?
But Dr. Shadee, I just have a point here to make. There are schools actually which sort of try to argue that they actually argue that the whole of four madhabs or their Islamic law is actually done by humans or completed by humans. So they might have done something wrong. So we actually need to do ijtihad on those classical teachings as well. And also just adding to what Rahat was trying to say, that if I am here studying here in this room and I study Ghazali, for example, and he gives us like 8 reasons for a scholar to become a mujtahid, and if a certain scholar in Pakistan, according to my personal beliefs or my rationality, he fills that category. So am I? So is that good for me if I consider him as a mujtahid and then start following him instead of following the 4 madhabs? Because to me he fills those categories of mujtahids explained by Ghazali.
Okay, I mean, let's take a look at it again. This is totally rational. There's no taqleed in this. It's a rational topic. They said that the imams of the madhabs were humans and therefore they could make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
They also are humans and can make mistakes.
Yeah.
So we are all humans who can make mistakes. So what is the best? When you have all subjective people, then the truth will be, in matters of religion, where there's less bias, right? You're a human being no different than anyone else. So therefore, whenever there's subjectivity and thought, the safety and the correctness will be with the consensus of intellects, where biases are removed, limitations of understanding are removed, right? So logically speaking, he too is the human being that can make a mistake. So if he comes out and announces, I've discovered that all four madhabs were wrong all this time, I ask myself, okay, because they're humans, but you also are a human. So you're one person going against 100,000 people. All of you are humans. No one's smarter than anyone else here, right? And in fact, if there's bias, don't we all have biases and limitations and subjectivity? So when I combine my idea, do you think we're 100,000 people over 5 countries, over 10 centuries, they're not going to suffer the same bias, the same limitation, and the same subjectivity. So rationally speaking, it is foolish to go with the 1 versus the 10, or the 100 versus the 1,000, right? So it's a matter of eliminating subjectivity, bias, and limitation.
Okay, so another very small question related to it is that there is a big difference. How should we approach religion? For instance, if I'm trying to learn Islam and I'm just starting it, should I consider should I consider rationality first? Should I consider my rational knowledge first, or my rational blessings that Allah has given me, or should I consider my faith first and then just start exploring Islam and its ilmul kalam and theology and all? So that also, I mean, how should I start? Because if I talk to my friend and he is going to ask me about Miraj, for example, or he asks me about any other such matters which are to me which are difficult for me to explain, on a rational basis. So we need to have faith for that. So what will you say? Should we consider revelation first or the reason first? Because in the times that we are living in, rationality and your personal freedom and personal speech becomes very important. So how are we going to tackle with these people?
I would say revelation is built upon rationality.
Yeah.
Our trust in the Prophet ﷺ is based on a reason that we can think about. That, for example, when he came, his reputation was established, right? So therefore, Allah has furnished you with a reason to say, yes, I trust this person. And I can furnish you, I could put pen to paper why I trust this person. So I would know that revelation is always based on rationality. The most rational thing to do is to be a skeptic in your own opinion and to be trusting in the consensus of human opinions. And in matters of religion, like the ayah that I opened with, Allah has guaranteed us that the large consensus of the Muslims will never be astray. It will be on guidance. Not of the Muslims, of the Muslim scholars. Does that mean the scholars of Egypt today? No. It means all the countries of all the centuries. So it's upon me now to start digging. In Andalusia, what did they say here? But what did they say? And then until I find and I realize, okay, everywhere they came to this conclusion that this ayah means this, that this hadith means that. So I start to trust in that consensus, okay? And that consensus is not correct just because it's a group who voted for it. No, there's a reason. And now I could start looking at the evidences that they offered. Our scholars are not allowed to hide their evidences. And that's why they wrote books. The Quran says over 270 times the word clarification. Clarify. Show the people. If you have an argument, show. SubhanAllah, Sharia is an open source, right? It's not like Apple, where they close everything off and you have no clue what's going on. It's open source. You want to know Bukhari's justification, why he selected their hadiths? It's fine. It's open source. You can go study them. Study his chains. You want to know why Ash-Shafi'i, for example, has a certain ruling? Those books are all available, right? And those scholars came to certain conclusions for reasons.
Dr. Shadee, isn't it possible that when we are talking about, current rulers or scholars of one country, if you don't agree with them, you think that, you know, they are too aligned with the state or in their propaganda, etc.
Very possible.
Very possible, yeah. So isn't it possible that, let's say I'm taking a judgment from a fiqh issue, trying to resolve that issue, taking an opinion from an Egyptian or a Saudi scholar or any other scholar, isn't it possible that they are giving
they have a bias, a political bias.
Yeah, and also, and that's very well possible that they are giving ruling on the basis of from their own culture perspective, and that may not apply in my country.
100%. That's why modern issues. One of my teachers told me. He said, when it comes to a modern issue, just wait and see where the opinion settles around the ummah. Don't just jump on one opinion, because there's a new matter. It's only 10 years old, and only 5 people have written anything on it. He said, just be patient. Wait. Okay? Let it sink into... Yeah, let it sink into the intellects of the rest of the ummah. They all have brains too.
Mm-hmm.
There are many scholars in many countries. Let's all just wait and see what the majority, where the winds are going, where the scholars are going. Not winds, because that's like whimsical, but where the scholars are headed. Where is Ahl Sunnah comfortable with on this subject? Right?
Because the condition are not being met in that particular society.
It's not being met. And here's the thing, though. Let's say I'm in a jam.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to go with it. I have no other choice. And may Allah accept or forgive, right? And if he's wrong, we'll see the result in this world, and he'll be forgiven in the afterlife. So let's say someone gives you the fatwa. Let's say you're jammed. I mean, many people, they are in a situation, I need the fatwa right away. I can't wait 10 years, right? So they go to a pious scholar. That pious scholar, I don't want to write the fatwa. I want to wait, but Sheikh, I need it now. So he writes you the fatwa, okay? Because he knows that you need it. He may be wrong. You're both forgiven if he's pious and you're pious. You're both forgiven, but you will see the error in this life. You'll see that in 10 years, this didn't work out. This was no good, right? And the other scholars are seeing it too. And they're going to say, no, we don't like this direction, right? Or they may say the opposite. They may say, yeah, you were right all along. The Sheikh was right all along, right? And we all have come to agree that there's no other choice except this. So that's why if there's a dire need, you take the fatwa from a pious person with a pious intention, and you will, inshallah, be forgiven even if it's a mistake. Because the Prophet ﷺ guaranteed the judge, he gives the ruling for the sake of Allah with taqwa, he is rewarded, not just forgiven, rewarded. And the one who follows him is forgiven, even if it's a mistake. So look at how generous Allah is here, right? It's almost like in COVID-19, can you blame anybody?
Yeah.
Does anyone have a global pandemic before, right? There's no precedent for this. So, okay, we're going to learn. You might not be right. We're going to learn. And we come to a consensus after a while. But nobody should be blamed because everyone tried to do their best. And we've never done this before. So no one's to be blamed. So when there's a new matter, the elderly, known scholars who have reputations amongst the scholars, they should speak, they should give their rulings, and we'll wait and see. And then over time, it'll settle into the ummah, and we'll see how it settles. So that's how basically we interact with situations. So you have to see that this new matters, it's a living tradition that we live in here.
Mm-hmm.
It's living, and it's rational.
Yeah.
And it's rational too.
Yeah.
It's rational, right?
Dr. Shadee, I have a question. Like after Itmam al-Hujjah, so and the act Itmam al-Hujjah, like after there's so and the act of takfir and blasphemy. So after Itmam al-Hujjah and after the advent of Rasul or Prophet, peace be upon him, can the act of takfir be implemented? And is it possible for anyone to just kill anyone committing blasphemy, just as happened in Pakistan recently? So, and they're very much promoted, they're very much liked by the people because they say that they are actually the lovers of the Prophet. So it would be very...
Look, love of the Prophet is a wonderful thing, but we have law and order.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
We have laws. And just like we said that these mujahid, fake mujahid, I would say, false jihadi groups, they're non-state actors. This non-state jihad is unaccepted in Islam except in one condition, in which we said that there is a invasion of your country, and your the president of the land is fighting back, and the army is fighting. You may also fight back the enemy on your own, right? You don't have to be part of the army unless he orders you. Then you have to obey him. But let's say you're out of reach. He's only controlling 500,000 people army or 50,000 people army. All right, that's all he can control. You can fight on your own with a militia all you want, unless he says otherwise. Unless he says, "Go home, I have a plan." Every act like that, punishment, war, must be in accordance with the state action. If the state is not taking the action, this is not against you, right? But can we declare that someone made takfir or blasphemy? We can declare it, yeah. But we just can't do anything about it, okay? I can do something about it. I could not talk to the person anymore. I could not buy his books. I could not let my kids play with his kids, right? I can go on the other side of the street if he's walking on the street. I can do all those things I want, right? I can believe and tell my friends, this is blasphemy, right? Don't talk to him. Don't associate with him. Don't praise him, right? I can do that all I want. Nobody can stop me, but I can't go kill him.
So this is what we were talking about in the beginning of our conversation, that these people who take weapons in their own hand, take law in their own hand, they take actually precedent from the early times when there were no nation state.
Yeah, that's what I was talking, the pre-prophetic era and the post-prophetic era. So does the rulings remain same?
From those times, that in front of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, this incident happened. So now we can do the same thing.
Okay,
and that's where I think most of the people forget we were living in a colonial era, or in a before nation state. We have laws, and
no, that's their error is somewhere else. Their error is in going with their own selves to the original sources when they have no authority to do so. They should instead have went to the madhabs and got the dominant and going opinions of the madhabs. So this is a person who is going into the woods and cutting up, raccoons and picking berries and mixing it up and saying, here's medicine for cancer. And then people are dying. You cannot go directly to the sources and come with the ruling unless you're a mujtahid imam. You see now the benefit of this order, hierarchy. So yeah, it seems like the hierarchy, it's not a hierarchy that comes without qualifications, right? You see now why we have order in our Islamic law. So yes, we may tell a very nice modernist, sorry, your word means nothing to us, but it's the same method that's also telling these vigilantes, your word means nothing either, right?
So basically, we're talking about the breakdown of Islam, the knowledge actually, and the Muslim majority states actually.
Talking about what?
The lack of knowledge among the people.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
and the lack, and I'll tell you who. Yeah, let me tell you one thing before we go to Rahatullah. It's the same people who said, forget scholars, let's do it ourselves. That same mentality is used by ISIS. They don't follow any madhab, right? They wouldn't stand to the scrutiny of even a middle level student of knowledge, right?
Dr. Shadee, don't they follow because most of the times they are following their local leaders, religious scholars.
Like in our country, that's what's happening. Like those people are supported by the local or the mainstream religious leaders. Not a single religious leader is opposing them or saying that it's against the Islamic order. So that's where we are coming from. Like, okay, in our country, it's the opposite.
It seems that's a problem.
And you stated like, okay, we cannot confine it to a single place or a single country, but we are a country of 200 million people. So we have to look inward. Like, I can't bring a fatwa from Turkey or Egypt and tell them, my people, that, okay, believe it. Because our people are looking at our religious leaders. So,
I mean, I don't know the situation specifically, but it is possible that a large group of scholars can come to a policy or political error. That's possible.
Yeah.
That's very possible, right? And you may be in a situation of grave hardship, and that's why someone would look outside of those scholars and say, let's look at, someone outside this box. But I would say, no, still don't look outside this box. Your specific order that you received was no good, but you should still observe a sense of tradition and reasoning in our scholarship in our fiqh. You may have to look into another box of Hanafi school of thought. You may have to look to Syrians or Indians or Turks or other schools within Pakistan. Maybe even there are other groups within Afghanistan. So I do understand that you have the jam that you're in, and how that this type of thing would make anyone with any common sense make a blanket statement or a judgment that these traditional scholars are this is no good, because look at the result that we got.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like making an order, from a company, and all the fruit is rotten. You think that all of their orders are rotten. The whole company's rotten. But I would probably tell you that we do have a system of the madhab, and you have unfortunately gotten, a bad order.
And the same pattern can be applicable to pretty much all the Islamic rulings, especially because we are talking about them from Pakistan perspective, and it literally poisoned the entire society. And the hate, the perpetual hate. People, we used to scapegoat other people now. Now we are scapegoating each other. Now we are finding, okay, who is now Gustakhe Rasul?
I really hate these things, honestly. And I would not blame a person. How can I blame a person who turns his back on all of that scholarship if that's the results? I cannot blame a person. But I would simply advise them that look outside of that culture, that political milieu, that environment, for maybe that environment has truly corrupted the scholarly class. Go look into another country and look at the scholarly class in that country. Go look at individuals. Explore outside of this rotten pot. This pot may be rotten. There may be other pots that are not. Right? And I think many people have that. For example, in Egypt, the Sufis tend to be those who just follow any tyrannical ruler. And they seem to be the permissive of heresy. So many Arabs growing up, and they say, look at these people. So this tasawwuf is all wrong, right? It's all bad. Let me follow the Salafis. Okay. Because at least they like to get evidence, and they like to follow the knowledge properly, and they don't, not all of them, follow these tyrannical rulers. But I would say to them, wait, hold on a second. No, you're making a mistake. Go look at the people of tasawwuf in other countries, right? In Pakistan, I don't think it's like that.
They are totally apolitical.
Yeah. They go look at the people of tasawwuf from other centuries. Get out of that milieu. Islam is not what Egypt says is Islam.
Yeah.
Right? Or North Africa says is Islam. That may be their error. So go look outside. And that's why, honestly, travel and learning and history is very, very important. Because it frees you from being bound in these binaries of my culture and my society. So just as you're coming upon these rock and a hard place, we also have it in Egypt. Very similar. Rock and a hard place, where all the traditional scholars of tasawwuf, it's like all of them almost, very few of them have any other different opinion. They're all subject to this political bias, which I don't want to be part of. So I'm going to go, to scholars elsewhere. I'm just giving hypotheticals here, right? So, yeah.
Go ahead, Rahat.
Okay. So yeah, one more thing. So like when we are talking about fiqh and Islamic laws, so most of the time we are talking about the societies in which Muslims are in majority. So do Islam have like the specific rulings regarding the societies in which Muslims are in minorities, like in the Western world? And we see all these like stabbing and stuff happening in Europe.
And would those rules be applicable because the conditions are not being met?
There are certain, from what I see, the general Sharia is going to apply when it comes, if you're talking about the question of law and order and society and taking the law into your own hands. So in Europe, they went and stabbed those guys who drew the Prophet or blasphemed the Prophet. We would say the same thing as haram, right? For someone to do that. There's no different, right? We would go a step further. In Pakistan, you can stand up and say, "Oh, governor, fear Allah and change this constitution and fix it and apply the law of Allah subhanahu." You can say that if you want to, right? You can say, "No, don't do this. Use wisdom. Teach the people first. Make them love the Sharia first. Then apply the law." You can say that too. But us in the West, we can't say that, right? We have a bigger problem. We can't even support any of these political parties unless you're supporting them saying, this is the lesser of two evils. In which case, like I'd like to invite, a presidential candidate so-and-so to talk to our community because you are the lesser of two evils, right? So we can't even advise him because we would have to exit the framework of belief completely, right? On what basis will I give him any advice? On what basis, right? So we have a bigger problem. And that's why many people who get involved in political activism, they have no other choice, but they have to exit the framework of the Quran. And by exiting the framework of the Quran, it really brings a lot of problems and a lot of contradictions. They end up fighting for matters that are prohibited in our law, right?
Yeah.
Because they've exited the framework.
Isn't politics, this is all about politics because you're trying to engage with those people, and at the same time, by engaging with the like-minded, you know that not all of your conditions are going to be met, or maybe those some of those things which you wishes for your community. But there'll be chances that out of 5, there'll be at least 2 will be, taken into account.
Well, see, the problem is that, like we said, all the world refers by, references and track record, right? Mm-hmm. So if you want to get something done politically, if you want to be a political actor, the politician in front of you, he's going to look and he's going to ask, like, what's this person's track record? What's the references? Who does he know? What is he up to? So you have to establish that track record, right? And you have to operate within parties. Mm-hmm. Politics operates within teams, madhabs, right? They're madhabs. You can't just come out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. You need to have a track record within that madhab. But that madhab, the left or the right, the Democrats and the Republicans, there are matters within them that you can never support. But in order to gain traction, you may need to be on the record supporting certain things.
Because it serves my interest?
Huh? No, because the people they want to work, in order to gain any traction in politics, you have to operate in a tribe, right? And that tribe will judge you. Are you standing up for the principles of this tribe? Show us, where have you stood up for our principles? And if out of 10 principles and policies, 3 of them are forbidden in Islam, right? Then those people will have to make a choice. Either I play the game and I disobey Allah and I try to find a workaround for it, or I don't play the game at all. And that's a big problem in the West. And I don't see a solution. I really don't see a middle. I don't see a middle example. I don't see anybody who's saying, here, I'm playing the game. The Democrats all support me, but I have never stood up for anything forbidden. I haven't seen it. Right. So until somebody comes and models that, it's all talk.
So, Dr. Shadee, there's a different question on that. As Dr. Jonathan Brown wrote an article on LGBTQ, and you had a conversation on that. So it might be a repeat question, but still, I just wanted to clear that. So he said that when it's implemented on a political level, right? So it's not a fiqh issue. It's something very political. So as he mentioned that in some states, the Sharia law is banned, right?
Yeah.
So that questions the marriage of Muslim community, right? So how do someone deal with that? Like someone can get up and get into the court against that person. Like they won't consider the Sharia law, right?
Okay,
let's divide it into two parts. The first part is, again, in your tasawwur, in your conception, there is a separation of political and fiqh, right? When we make a political decision, is Allah watching us and judging us, or is the off button have been pressed? Is he going to take us to account on the same standard? He is, right? We're still answerable to Allah. Okay? And you may do something haram, and Allah will forgive you if there is a dire need to do so. And dire need in Sharia is physical. Will you die? Will you lose a limb? Will you go blind? Will you go homeless? That's dire need. If the answer is no, I'm not. I just won't get elected to office. Or the university won't, they won't like me in the liberal arts universities. And they won't give me a position at Harvard or Yale or Princeton. Okay? They won't let me publish. You won't die. You can get another job. So those aren't dire needs. So that's the first thing. Now, the second one, can you repeat what you said about the court? Because I didn't get that exactly.
So, like if someone, when the Sharia law is banned, right, the state is interfering in between the personal matters, marriage. So if nikah nama is not considered, if nikah is not considered, right, if it's not considered by the state, it's not considered valid, then someone can go against me if I'm married. Then they can go against me, then I'm committing something wrong. Because nikah is not considered when the Sharia is.
The Sharia doesn't forbid you from getting a civil marriage certificate. It just says that in order to be alone with somebody, you have to
a contract.
You have to get a Islamic Sharia certificate as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so where's the conflict?
Yeah, because I just had that confusion, so I just wanted to make it clear.
In fact, according to some scholarship, you have to get an official state certification as well, because that's the only way to guarantee rights. And of course, all the imams, as a job professional protocol of mosques, masajid don't issue Sharia certificates for marriage unless you have already gotten a civil marriage application. So you have to, so the Sharia, they're not going to go outside of, they're not going to contradict the state for that.
Mm-hmm. That pretty much answers that. So there was another article by Jonathan Brown on Hudud law and the punishments of that. So in modern times, when talking to like a non-Muslim friend, like we are in a community, we're in a very global community, so we have friends from different ethnicity. So how would you explain someone about the Hudud law and the punishments? Someone very rational who considered very barbaric acts, right? So how could someone explain them that these acts are basically against the will of God or something like that? So how do you explain?
Barbarism and all that, that's emotional. That's an argument from disgust, right? That's not rational. And the only way to respond to an argument of disgust is a counter argument of disgust, right? So wait a second, you guys having drone strikes on Pakistan and you want to talk to us about, barbarism? That's the only way to respond to an argument of disgust is a counter argument of disgust, showing him his own absurdity, right? So hold on, you want to talk about moral and human behavior, yet your society deems it legal, for a man to urinate on a woman if he's going to pay her and she's willing to do it. That's allowed in your country. He urinates on her as a pornographic, entertainment or whatever you want to call it. Or that you guys have actually maimed hundreds of thousands of people, don't have limbs anymore because of drone strikes. But you want to talk to us about that? So hold on, your civilization only 200 years ago, 300 years ago, was pulling people in chains and making them slaves, right? And working them to death. And you were lynching and burning. And now you're lecturing us. Hold on a second. You're the guys it's your people, your grandfathers are the ones who dropped two atom bombs or whatever on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yeah. And people's their eyeballs melted down their eyes. And this is the civilization that wants to judge another civilization, right? Your civilization has lasted 200 years. It's what, 250 years.
But aren't we saying that Islam is a peaceful religion? Because we are claiming that.
You are saying you are responding one emotion with another emotion. You have to understand, in munadhara, there's rational arguments, there's emotional arguments, and there's authoritative arguments. You respond rational arguments with reason. You respond emotional arguments with counter emotions. You respond authorities with attacking the authority, the trustworthiness of the authority. So you have to understand what's coming at you. Is it a football, a baseball, or a basketball? Which one is coming at me? So that you should know how to catch it. There's a way to catch a basketball versus a hockey puck versus a baseball. We Muslims oftentimes respond to emotional arguments with reason, and we look stupid. And we cannot win. Because we don't know the basic game of munadhara, of debate. It's actually very simple, but once you learn it, you actually be like, wow, I'm free. I'm free because I'm not going to be attacked anymore. I know how to respond to this jujitsu, right? I know how to respond to this.
That's true.
So, good advice for married couple as well.
Yeah, it's exactly great advice for married couple, because a man will respond to an emotional. Oftentimes women, and there's probably, a big generalization. There is a rational argument, but that's only the wrapper. In reality, she's upset at something that you did emotionally.
That's even true at psychological level.
Yeah, that's what it is. If you upset her emotionally, then every word that comes out of your mouth will be unacceptable rationally until you solve it emotionally. And you don't solve anything emotionally with an argument or a rational proof, right? Or evidence.
Dr. Shadee, to your point about agreeing to the platform, which I think Rahat or Abdul talked about, and you gave your opinion that when you're agreeing to one party, you're basically agreeing to their agenda. And is that what you said, right?
Yeah, I said that the way politics works is in tribes. If you really want to get something done in politics, you have to join a tribe.
Yeah.
Right. In big level politics. I'm not talking about the locality, the township or something like that. The township doesn't matter. But in the big level politics, you have to operate as a tribe. And tribes only support those who have a track record of publicly defending the policies of the tribe. Right? Then we can say you can be, then they put you up as one of their people. So in order to play this game, if a Muslim wants to be a Democrat, he's got to show public, positions on things. He's got to go on record supporting certain policies. He wants to be a Republican, he's got to go on record supporting certain things.
Let's take...
give me a minute. Because now we are talking about, especially in American context, especially for Muslim, isn't it more about survival? And when we're talking about survival, so you have to be aligned with a polity or a party or a group which actually, give you some chance. On the other hand, another party which is basically trying to rip you off.
Well, which party are Chinese Americans aligned with?
I'm sorry?
Which party are Chinese Americans aligned with?
Again, but that's a debatable question, isn't it?
Okay, so there's no clear-cut answer, right?
Yeah.
But they're doing very well.
They are, yeah.
So how are they doing well when they're not aligned with one party or another? So therefore, the premise that to survive we have to align with one of the two parties has been shown to be faulty.
But those alliances can be changed. It's not a rigid one. You can change if you think the other parties has come up with a better plan and they listen to you, they engage with you, you can join them.
So you can become a swing vote, right?
Yeah, I mean, depends.
Whoever suits me at this juncture, I'll go vote with them. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
And my opinion was that this is more of a political question rather than a religious or a fiqh question, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, as long as it doesn't contradict matters of Sharia. It is.
And in your heart, you don't need to support them, because out of 10, 8 points you are agreeing or they agreeing with your,
So,
beliefs.
As a voter, you're correct. As a politician, it's different. Because a voter, I don't need to support everything that you believe in order for me to deem you the lesser of two evils.
Actually, it's easy for politicians, isn't it? Because they can go to Congress and they don't need to, vote on that certain legislation.
Politicians will not survive unless they join a tribe. Just like an Islamic scholar will not gain traction with scholarship unless he is in a madhab. It's just how it works, right? A politician will not get far unless he's either Democrat or Republican.
But even in those tribes, people agree with their entire, one off or 2 points off of their agenda, isn't it?
You can disagree on the lesser points, no problem. But you can't disagree on the bigger points. You can't disagree on Israel. You can't disagree on LGBT if you're in the Democratic Party. You can't disagree on Israel if you're in the Republican Party. So pick which STD do you want to have, right? That's basically what you end up with, right?
Yeah.
So at local level, fine. Yeah, you can become a mayor, right? As an independent, you might win. But to get there at the national level, Washington, D.C., you're going to be one of the two parties.
Let's take a question from Souman, because I just want to be equal.
Okay, so I have two small questions. The first one is related to this popular decision taken by the Turkish government on Hagia Sophia. So what do you think is going to be a fiqh, I think truly is not the right word, like the classical Islamic perspective on this very modern issue of Hagia Sophia? And my second question is related to, as we already discussed, the collective will of people. We are seeing that has been corrupted for years because of colonization and other internal issues. So how do you think we can improve on that? Because we are still living in an imperialist age, due to this global, because of this global world. As a person living in a developing country, I know my economics, my politics, and other social realities are still pretty much a consequence of the colonial reality. So how do you think we can shape that and reform that in a better manner so that we can improve our conditions socio-economically and politically?
Dr. Shadee, to Hagia Sophia, Dr. Mustafa Akyol, he wrote a piece in New York Times. Can you also respond to his...
I don't read anything that comes off of his typewriter, to be honest with you.
Oh, really?
The man has such a record of nonsense.
Is it?
Oh, of course. You got to read his books, right? I read his stuff. I thought it was good in the beginning. Nice book.
Same, I read his book, yeah.
Now, there's a reason he's published by certain publishers, because he's pushing that modernist agenda. So just off the bat, he might make 1 point right here or there. Likewise, Salman Rushdie may have written a nice essay somewhere along the line, or anyone else could. But when I look at overall the trajectory of somebody, I'm not even going to read what he has to say, right? Because if it's a matter of religion. If he wants to give me a review on, a movie, I could read it, right? But I'm not going to read what he has to say on the matters of deen and politics. So overall, in the Hagia Sophia matter, on classical fiqh is the easy question.
Mm-hmm.
On political maneuvering and what's wise and what's good, I'll leave that for the people of that region to discuss it. I can't really get involved in that. But on matters of classical fiqh, there's no question that returning it to be a masjid was the right thing to do, because making it a museum was haram in the first place. It was a... Huh?
Museum is haram?
No, making the mosque into a museum is forbidden.
Yeah.
So that's what it was. It was already a legitimately standing masjid, acquired, and was rightfully a mosque to begin with.
500 years, yeah.
Ataturk made it a museum. The act was forbidden.
True.
So by classical fiqh is the easy question. And I'm not going to get involved in if someone wants to have a debate on the timing or whatever. I'm not going to get involved in that. But by classical fiqh, if something was done that was haram, to reverse it is a good deed, as a general rule. So that's the general rule which is known. And I'm not going to get involved in the other debate. So a lot of people, they care far more what their Western publishers and audiences would think than what Allah and His Messenger would think. I have a problem with that. I don't really want to. So that's one thing to think about as well when you think about matters like this. About the national will question, the collective
counter argument would be that wasn't that in the initial place it was a church, and they converted it to mosque.
Does that mean that it was illegitimately converted just because it was a church?
I mean, that's a political debate, isn't it?
No, not at all. It's a legal debate.
That when you can convert it?
You can convert a church. How many masajid today were churches in the world? In the West, many.
Yeah.
Right? The question is, was it legally acquired?
That's a fair debate, yeah.
So that's the real question. Okay. Now, if it was legally acquired, now let's just think about this. The entire city of Constantinople, the Hagia Sophia is a building within the city of Constantinople. People are wondering now about, was it legally acquired? The whole city was conquered. What are you talking? Right? The whole city was conquered, that should be the real question. Now, if you want to ask the question is, was Hagia Sophia originally a mosque, legally acquired as a mosque? Why don't you ask the whole city? So have all the Muslims move out of Istanbul, right? If that was the case. So there's two ways to have acquired. You legally purchase it, the land, then it's your land. You do what you want with it. Okay? You can just tear it down and make a swimming pool if you want. Or it was owned by the government. If it was owned by the government of Constantinople, well, now all of the government's possessions have come to you as conqueror. So you own it. So still you can do whatever you want with it. Now, the only way that it is not valid, is that if it exists independently by, let's say, a Christian Orthodox order, right? An Orthodox organization. It's not owned by the governor of Constantinople, the king of Constantinople. It's owned by an organization. And then the Muslim ruler says, okay, I'm taking it. That's illegal. If he tells them, I'll buy it from you, and they accept it, okay, then it's legal. If it was owned by the governor and he conquered the governor, then it's legal. So you can go to the history books for that. Okay.
Did Umar bin Khattab, when he conquered Jerusalem, can we apply the same application over there?
For what mosque?
For the we are talking about Baitul Muqaddas.
Well, they gave him the keys, right?
Yeah, but he still didn't, offer prayer there.
No, he didn't. What do you mean he didn't offer prayer there?
Well, I think I can't recall. Rahat,
You're
can you-
talking about the
It was
Church
another
of the Holy
mosque.
Sepulchre.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not what he went to take. And it was not what they gave him.
But he conquered the city, is it?
He conquered the city. I don't know the details of it. Do you know who owned it at the time?
That's where that was my next question was going to be. If it was owned by that government or ruler, then
No, you can't just if we go in. If it was owned by the governor, then he could have.
yeah.
Right? Think about this. If it's jihad, you're taking their life, right?
Mhm.
That's war, right? You're taking their life. You think you can't take their building, their bricks? So if it's war, it's one thing, and he owns it. The king owns all of what the king owns is yours now, right? That's the nature of conquest. But if it's owned by the citizenry, and we've never seen anywhere else, I've never seen anywhere else where a local church that was established by a priest, they just scoop it up and take it. It's only these ones that were run and owned by the king that they take it. It's now legal spoils of war, right? And Allahu A'lam, I'm sure we could. So, but the assumption here is that Muhammad Fatih and all the scholars at that time, were wrong. Like, we have no sense that, to me, as a default, the default is that for 500 years, these Ottoman scholars are there. Muhammad Fatih himself, as a default, they're not going. Do you think that they're going to disobey Allah intentionally and rip off and steal? That's my question. Before I investigate something, my default position is that they won't. Everyone else's default position that's writing these articles is that they will. That's the default. So I'm sure if we investigated it, and some people had more interest in the topic than me, have investigated it and found that it was legally established. And if it wasn't legally established, the prayer in it would be batil. If it's stolen goods, stolen property, the prayer in it may be batil in some madhabs, right? Maybe. So, I mean, that's the default position, is that it was a mosque. It was established as a mosque, right? It was inherited from generation to generation as a mosque. Then it was made a museum.
Point is,
yeah,
that could be a political decision as well. You don't want to convert that one. You want
it could be. Yes, it could be. It could be. Yeah. There's wisdom involved in these things. There's the philosophy of, why do we want to make enemies with people, right? I always take that philosophy. I mean, I defend my religion and everything, but I'm not in the mood to go make 1,000 enemies tomorrow, right? Yeah. I want to practice my religion in a way that is a good dawah to people. I'm personally not interested in making enemies with the world.
True.
Right? It might sound like it when we defend a point of law or doctrine, because we defend it aggressively, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that in the application of it, I'm interested in upsetting my neighbors, upsetting my township, right? No, I actually don't want to. I want to get why make I always say, why make enemies when we could be friends, right? What's better in the long run?
Especially in this globalized world, yeah.
Of course, yeah.
What about my next level question? Sorry.
Go ahead.
So, Souman had a question. Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying the second question was related to the national will. How can we improve and reform ourselves?
Well, that's a good question. That's a great question. How do we handle this situation, and how do we start changing the ummah-wide will? Anytime that you have such a big project, you really only can work in small increments. You can't take on the whole thing, right? My personal philosophy of that is that all I can do is look at my sphere of influence. I am concerned with the entire ummah. That's sphere of concern, but I have sphere of influence. And time is better spent on the sphere of direct influence. The first direct influence being me, the second direct influence being like my son or my daughter or my wife and my local township, the Muslims in my town, right? So that's how I look at it. I tend to not have much interest in a big agenda on the sphere of concern when I haven't yet proven it at the level of influence, right? So I like to, it's called modeling, right? I like to see an example. Show me a demonstration that your philosophy works with one person. Show me that it works with 2 or with 5 or with 10. Show me that it works with 20 families. Show me that it's changing the life of 20 families, that Islam has transformed and improves the lives of 50 families in the town. Then we can talk. Then you don't need to talk, because your action, your demonstration is the talk. Now the people could look and say, wow, everyone associated with that mosque, their families are in order. Their finances are in order. Their mental state is healthy. Divorce is less. The children like the dads like the kids like their dads. The wives love their husbands. They're honest. They're clean. Their homes are clean. They don't do drugs. They don't have criminal records. That is your dissertation, right? It's a living demonstration. So that's my philosophy on it, on how to effect change.
So
let's wrap it up.
Yeah. So before we could end the conversation, I just want to make it clear. Do anyone else have a question? Because many people are waiting for this podcast specifically. So I just want to make sure that if anyone else got the question, or
I just have last question. Okay. Gone. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have this question related to this intermingling of this relationship of culture and diversity or other cultural norms, and then trying to merge them with our Islamic laws, because in subcontinent, in our part of the world, especially when it comes to familial relations between a husband and a wife, Quranic text and other manuscripts are used very in a particularizing sense, and they're applied on the family. And literally, I know people who use the word daraba in Surah Nisa in Quran, and then they try to justify the beating of their wives. And this is a very political issue here in Pakistan as well. So how? My larger question is, sometimes these cultural norms try to override the Islamic law or the true teachings of the religion.
Urf, cultural norms, is muhakkam. It is it is something applicable in our religion. But what is cultural norms? Cultural norms is what people agree to benefits them, right? Therefore, as soon as a cultural habit or tradition starts being harmful to people, and they're voicing that harm, it stops being a valid cultural habit. So what is cultural habits? It's the unspoken things we all agree about, right? That it benefits us, it's not haram, and we're all doing it, right? As soon as it's harming somebody, it no longer becomes something that we can do. If it's not harming everyone and it's benefiting, and this is how we do things, you can raise your kid and say, son, this is how we do things, right? Okay. And we all do this. What's the reason in the Quran and Hadith? There's no reason in the Quran and Hadith except that we all agree upon it, right? And the Quran has confirmed whatever the Muslims agree upon benefits them, and it's not haram, then we can do it, right? So don't go against our cultural norms, right? We can say that to our... But once a cultural norm is showing to be truly harmful, it should be broken. It should be removed. It should be like, this is a cultural revolution. In this respect is acceptable, without the cultural revolution being worse than the culture, right? Without the medicine being worse than the harm, than the disease. So it has to be changed in a manner that is not more harmful. So for example, it could happen that in a township, in a country, in a whole region, that the elders have a way of doing things that's very harmful to the youth, or that the husbands harmful to the wives. And times have changed. And we don't like this anymore, right? But the way in which we do it, if we now do it by breaking up families, and everyone's family is broken up, now we may have done more harm. So we have to revisit the manner in which we transform our societies. And we should, you know, I'm sure it's very difficult for certain cultures because of the way they live. For us modern folks who live in the modern economy and we live in a modern world, we do recognize that there's fluidity. Things are changing. Certain things should never change, right? Certain things should never change, but certain things may change. So the way in which I talk to my children and tell them what to do, I will always have the right to tell them what to do, right? Always, if you're living under my roof, right, I can tell you what to do. But if I want you to love me, I have to treat you in a different way because people now are different, right? So I have to adapt. Okay.
Dr. Shadee, a quick question without going into detail about when people talk about reforms in Islam, reformation, isn't reformation a Christian term, and they are basically coming from a Christendom perspective?
We don't actually have to. We would not have a reform of Islam. We may have a reform in the way we do things.
Like someone was talking about a cultural kind of a reformation.
We may have, there may be some cultural reformations. For example, if it's a norm for a man to come back from work and put his feet up and, you know, read a book or open the TV and shout from the corner of his mouth, dinner. And your dad did that and your mom obeyed him. And your wife's dad did that and her mom obeyed her and they thought it's fine and nobody had a problem with that. Is it haram, first of all, to do that? It's not necessarily haram. If we all agree that that's how life is, right? I mean, we go up to drive through and you don't say hi. You say, give me a small coffee and a donut. And you drive. You don't look at the person. You give him $1. You take your cup. Is it haram? No. We all agree we want things to work like that. So what if that was acceptable in a certain time period? Well, times have changed. And women now are hearing that, oh my gosh, nobody does this anymore. Why don't you respect me? And so the view of respect is now improved or changed, let's say, hypothetically. You can change that. But the medicine should not be worse than the disease, right? In that respect, we don't have this cultural revolution and reform and flip the house upside down and be against the elders. No, the elders are still good. They just maybe have one thing, right, that we don't like. The men are still good, but they may have one thing that we don't. The women are still great, but they might have one thing that needs to be changed. The kids, same thing. So we have, in Islam, we prioritize the harmony of the group. No change in our society should come at the expense of totally the harmony of the group. And if the good and correct ways of change don't work, Allah will take over, right? If doing things right does not affect change, then Allah Ta'ala will take over. Maybe He'll send an army to destroy you all.
As Allah says in Quran, He'll change the people with the next generation.
And maybe He'll use oppressors to change the people. Let's say, for example, we come to a people and say, treat the women better. We tell them in a nice way, treat the women better, right? And He doesn't listen to you. Okay, now Allah will get involved. And Allah may send, for example, another nation to come and destroy your nation and completely destroy it. Yes, that was evil, but you guys never listened. You know, when you were harming other people, you never listened. So Allah sent you an oppressor to change you. So, you know, we, on our side, we have the right to recognize harm and to change harm, but in the method that is good, that is not more harmful.
Abdurrahman, the Mutazila position on Prophet Ibrahim Islam's Dream.
Yeah, so there was a question like Mu'tazila, and I believe Ibn Arabi has a question on the sacrifice of, or the dream of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Like they said that, like in a modern psychoanalytic world, if someone had a dream, that would be mostly in the symbolic form, right? Because
Yeah.
the dreams, it's a work of soul, ruh, or it's not the work of ego. So that's mostly in a symbolic form. It takes symbols, right? Metaphors and symbols. So isn't it a possibility that that question comes from Mu'tazila scholars? So I wanted to ask that. So they say that isn't it a possibility that Ibrahim alayhi salam had a dream that probably was wrongly interpreted, and it may be.
You're talking about blasphemy laws. I'm about to bring you the blasphemy laws right now upon that person who said that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. So that means that they are mostly in the symbolic form, right? But my answer was like, if that was wrongly interpreted by Ibrahim alayhi salam, why would Allah put that whole story in the Quran, right? Because Allah would know that if it isn't true, if that dream wasn't by Allah, if it isn't true. So why would that whole story be put in the Quran and follow through Sunnah till now?
My 10-year-old can refute that. Because prophets do not make mistakes in the orders that Allah gave them, and the dreams of prophets can be literal orders.
Mm-hmm.
They're not only symbols. They could be symbols, and they could be literal commandments.
Like in Musa alayhi salam's when he killed a person.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that was necessary.
Musa alayhi salam, he pushed that man, and he accidentally killed him. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That was literal, right?
Yeah.
That happened. But that's not the religion. He didn't make a mistake in the Torah. He accidentally killed a man in this world. He didn't accidentally misunderstand the Torah. That's impossible. Or else then Allah has chosen a messenger who doesn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And messengers have fatana. They have intelligence and they understand. And Allah is clear in what He transmits to them. So messengers do not make mistakes in the revelation.
That's true. So yeah. I think that pretty much answers everything. And I would really like to thank Dr. Shadee for giving us so much time and answering everything. I really appreciate for joining today on the podcast. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, guys.
No, thank you very much.
Dr. Shadee.
Jazakumullah.
Have a good day.
You too. Barakallahu feekum.